In this video lesson, we are going to talk about the difference between independent and dependent variables and how they function when you are working with scatter plots. So some important terminology to know is what is a variable. So a variable is something that can change or be measured. So here are some examples that you might see when you come across scatter plots. Things like money, temperature, length, weight, height, basically anything that you could label on either your x or y axis on your scatter plot. So people tend to confuse independent and dependent variables. And one way to think about them is cause and effect. So cause means something that happens, and the effect happens as a direct result of whatever this was. So you can think about independent and dependent variables that way. Whatever the independent variable is has a direct effect on the dependent variable. So we'll look at some examples to maybe help clear that up. Here are 3 different scatter plots that show some really good examples of independent and dependent variables. This first graph here on the left has study time on the x-axis and the mark or percentage that a student got on the y-axis. And you will see that there is a positive correlation. The dots on the graph tend to be moving up and to the right. Each dot could represent a student. The study time is the independent variable, and the mark is the dependent variable, because in general, the more time somebody is studying, the better their marks will be. And that's what this graph shows. If you look over here at this second graph, on the x-axis, we have weeks of practice, not unlike study time, and on the y-axis, we have the words per minute. And this graph shows how quickly somebody can type on a keyboard, on a computer, on a Chromebook. It is also a positive correlation because the longer you practice, you tend to be able to type more quickly, right? It comes with practice and speed. So again, here on the x-axis, we have the independent variable. And on the y-axis, for words per minute, we have the dependent variable because the speed that you can type is dependent on how long you practiced. The third graph over here has to do with speed of a car in kilometers per hour and the cost of the average speeding ticket, another positive correlation. The faster you're driving, the more expensive your speeding ticket will be, potentially, based on this graph. So again, automobile speed on the x-axis, that's the independent variable. And on the y-axis, we have the cost or the amount of money you would pay for a speeding ticket. That is dependent on how fast you are going. Now I want you to try. So here we have pairs of things that are cause and effect of each other. So I want you to think about which one is the independent variable and which one is the dependent variable. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and look at these 3 pairs. I will circle all of the independent variables so that you can check and see if you got them right after you've paused the video. The circled variables are the independent variables. How much pop you drink has a direct effect on your blood sugar level. The amount of time you spend on your phone at night has an effect on the quality of your sleep or how well you're sleeping. How much you water a plant depends on how much it grows. whether it's too much or not enough. Finally, the big takeaway here is that when you are creating a scatter plot on an x and y axis like you see here, the independent variable always goes along the x-axis, and the dependent always goes on the y-axis. So if you look back to our examples, you could look at, for example, the plant one. Here you would do maybe milliliters of water, how much you watered the plant. And on the y-axis, you would have growth of the plant. And then you would plot all of your points on your scatter plot, and I would imagine they would end up looking something like this, where if you overwatered, the plant wouldn't grow as much. Keep these tips in mind when you start creating your own scatter plots.